And we're live. You're listening to Interchain Jams, a series on Interchain FM, the Cosmos radio station. If you're seeking alpha in the cosmos, look no further. I'm your host, Django Unchained. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you that Interchain FM is a public good. We are completely self-funded. We do all of our own programming alongside the ICF. And so if you'd like to support our show, go ahead and delegate to Interchain FM on any of the app chains that we support. That would be greatly appreciated. Not only that, if you like the alpha, then the best thing you could do is to share and like this video. So with that said, I'd like to thank Mike Purvis and Professor Pouncey so much for being core contributors of our channel. And the last thing I'll say before we get started is we have a call to action for you. Last week, we got hit with a copyright claim for an intro jingle that we were apparently not supposed to use. So if you would like to submit your jingle that you would like to hear Interchain Jam play for each of our episodes going forward, you could go ahead and submit them in the comment section below. We will pick the one that we like, and it'll become the jingle for the foreseeable future. And that's your contribution to the Interchain. And with that said, I'd like to welcome Xerox Brainjar back on Interchain FM. He's been on our podcast before. So if you aren't familiar with Composable or any of the nomenclature that we are going to be using throughout this podcast, please do so and listen to the primer, which is linked in the show description below. And that said, welcome back to the show, Brainjar.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's nice that you're coming on screen now with your face and everything, whereas before you were completely anonymous and now you're just pseudo-anon, kind of.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So we're not going to spend any time on your background or the primer about composable finance or any of that, because again, if you as a listener want to get the primer, then you need to watch. We're going to keep this episode lean and mean, like you like it. And okay, so we're going to talk explicitly about Centauri this time, which is your bridge to the Kusama and Polkadot ecosystem by proxy. So you just opened up the IBC connection and it's live on mainnet. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I mean, we always believed that IBC was extendable to other ecosystems. I think it was just a matter of which ecosystem was going to do it and who was going to actually, do that. And so, starting out as a Polkadot project, I think our main focus has always been how do we get, users interacting with DeFi on multiple different chains in the most seamless way and trustless way, trust minimized way possible. And I think for us, bridging, because cross-chain was paramount, and we discovered IBC as this protocol that was used quite a bit and in production within the Cosmos ecosystem for like multiple years, passing billions of dollars of value. Quickly realized that this was a type of sort of trust assumptions we were okay with, like client verification, consensus proofs. How could we extend this to the Polkadot ecosystem so we could get both ecosystems to speak to each other? And so we embarked on like a multi-year journey to not only extend, build all the different components necessary for Polkadot to speak IBC, but also work with a bunch of different teams, ICF, Strangelove, et cetera, to actually extend IBC, the protocol itself, so that it's like better prepared for other ecosystems to interact with it. We made a bunch of, upstreams into IBC Go with Jack, and, we also built a sort of the IBC stack, IBC Go, but in Rust as a substrate palette for parachains. And so it was a very long and arduous process. We also had to build our own relayer called Hyperspace, because the existing relayers are not sort of Cosmos compatible, non-Cosmos chain compatible yet. So yeah, I think for me, like being able to extend IBC to Polkadot is just like the beginning. I think it's like, for us, it's proving to people that we no longer have to say all the time, IBC is limited to Cosmos chains. Like, this is now 100% debunked and not true. And, bridging protocols are still saying IBC is not possible outside of the Cosmos ecosystem. Like, doing so across Kusama and Polkadot now, I hope has put that, notion to bed.
So, I'm sharing my screen of the architecture between Cosmos and Composable so that people can get a visual idea about what's going on. So, yeah, like what you said, it's interesting how there's multiple different projects building to expand IBC to outside of just the Cosmos ecosystem in tandem. Composable Finance is doing this for the Polkadot parachain ecosystem, and we have Polymer doing that for the EVM ecosystem. And there's also there's an interesting one with Celestia doing it through their DA layer and acting as sort of a standard layer 0 for the different rollups, including EVM rollups. So I'm interested to see how the space is going to evolve. It does appear as if IBC is slowly but surely getting mindshare. I don't see any other cross-chain communication protocol taking this type of mindshare and expanding across other ecosystems. We don't see another general message passing protocol coming into Cosmos and becoming the standard. It's the other way around. We are exporting IBC. So that's quite bullish. Right.
Yeah. I mean, so actually, we're also working on IBC to Ethereum as well. We're also working on IBC to Near, and basically IBC everywhere. I think it's really fair to say that IBC is being exported as like the preferred generalized message passing framework in general for all ecosystems. So I think it is really hard, right? But because we're a team that's actually now done this in production, understands like the pain and all the components necessary, like, we are excited to collaborate with others who do want to push IBC, everywhere as well. Because like, we learned so much the hard way doing all of this stuff. Like, it's also beyond just setting up the actual IBC connection. Like, once you do so, Minscan still doesn't have support for IBC transactions on Polkadot, right? Kepler doesn't necessarily have support to show, DOT as an IBC asset. It just kind of shows up kind of like as another other asset. There's a lot of like sort of data layer work that also still needs to happen for IBC to actually feel like it's gone cross ecosystem. But yeah, I think like it is definitely true, but it's like definitely a process, because something that has been so sort of like in the veins of the Cosmos ecosystem for such a long time, expanding is like, lots of things do need to change for that to actually feel like IBC has been exported.
Why do you think that? I mean, in your words, from the perspective of Composable Finance team, why was it worth it to expend all this energy to export IBC as the message passing layer and not another standardized protocol? So for example, Polkadot has its own, right? Why wasn't it worth it to you to try to export that into Cosmos, but rather it was the other way around?
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's sort of like two questions when deciding, what type of messaging format do you want to use in general, right? Like, number one, is there adoption? And the corollary to that is, is it secure as well? Which is like, there's a the obvious focus should be, is it secure, and then is there adoption? But unfortunately, we've seen layer 0 and others take a lot of market share of like bridging, but they're just completely insecure protocols.
Well, yeah, with those things, it's always a matter of time before they implode if they're fundamentally insecure and they've made short-term trade-offs in order to make short-term gains.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. So the first thing I guess we could say is security, and the second thing is then like how sort of durable is it to adapt, right? And so XCM, we were looking at, could you export XCM as a messaging framework outside of the Polkadot ecosystem? But the reality is the way XCM works as a protocol is heavily reliant on the sort of shared security environment. It's almost like if the hub became, if you were a consumer chain and you could only receive IBC packets if you were a consumer chain. That's kind of how parachains and XCM work. And so that's not really like that extendable, right? Like as a transport protocol, because this also assumes like, will Cosmos chains become parachains? And that's just like not going to happen. And so from our perspective, we said, okay, so it makes sense that IBC as a transport protocol is definitely exportable, whereas like XCM lives within the Polkadot ecosystem.
Right. From your, are you plugged into the EVM ecosystem at all?
Yeah, I mean, so we are working on, I mean, so like most people on the team of Composable come from like ETH land. I think a lot of people are ETH maxis, or like they use L2s on a regular basis. They use Ethereum on a regular basis. We seek to, bring IBC to Ethereum and the sort of EVM associated ecosystem. But as of now, we're not connected to the Ethereum ecosystem yet.
Oh, right. I meant to say that in terms of sentiment for IBC adoption there, what's your read on the matter?
Yeah, I think
because from how it looks like on the outside, there's still, between all the layer 2s and the ETH settlement layer, there's still each building bespoke centralized bridges.
Yeah.
Largely backed by multi-sigs on each of them. And what are your thoughts about that?
I mean,
they've known of IBC's existence for a very long time. So I wonder what's the hurdle of between them adopting it.
Yeah, I mean, so I think like I think there's kind of like, a few points to break up in here, right? So the first thing is, would people want IBC, right? And I think aside from the security improvements upon like Axelar and layer 0 and other things, I think when you really look at the landscape, like cost and speed is actually insane to move from Ethereum to Cosmos and Cosmos to Ethereum, right? Like you move from Ethereum to Cosmos, it's $60, and you have to wait 25 minutes using Axelar. And like layer 0 doesn't even support that. And Gravity, I think, is like $75, and like potentially your bridge transaction gets delayed, until some other person gets batched with you, and then you're posted to another chain. So I think like speed and cost of EVM IBC will be like leaps and bounds better than existing trusted bridging solutions. So I think from that perspective, that is exciting. The other thing I think that is
that's exciting for retail users and people outside of the Ethereum ecosystem, but not exciting for Ethereum people themselves and the Ethereum power. Yeah, because they would rather keep the value within Ethereum and not have it exported to other ecosystems.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a counterpoint to that is similar to how Cosmos wants more blue chip assets to do cool DeFi things with. I really do think Ethereum, like let's just take the example of Pendle, right? Pendle basically takes yield bearing tokens and splits them up into principal tokens and yield tokens, like basically your principal and your yield. So imagine like Stride ST Atom could be moved over, and that's like a new type of asset that you could use on Pendle. I do believe that there's still like most people on Ethereum land still only use like ETH, WBTC, USDC, USDT. And I think there is like an opportunity for diversification if like the yield was actually there, right? Like ST Atom yield is pretty good. And so if you were able to print like a PT and a YT and like lever up on your principal token on say Aave or something like that, there are lots of, exciting possibilities you could do, sort of melding the two ecosystems DeFi landscape.
Right, I would agree with that. It's like we would enter into a singularity of sorts if these ecosystems were combined to be more than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
Jack Alfonso from the audience asks, "What do you think of Hyperlane using IBC?"
I mean, so Hyperlane does. I think there's been an argument about this for 24 hours already between different people, but I mean, Hyperlane flat out just doesn't use IBC. Like Hyperlane is basically just a different transport protocol that connects Cosmos to other non-Cosmos ecosystems. So like Hyperlane is not extending IBC. So that's my answer.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. We're going to move on to your Polkadot Treasury proposal about the ask for a DOT to be allocated as liquidity to bootstrap the DOT Osmo pool on Osmosis Dex, as well as whatever pool in Astroport, right? These Cosmos Dexes.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, so actually we're announcing this sort of like here. We haven't actually posted this yet, but we've been circulating it around to different people. I do think that in order for Atom, the Cosmos ecosystem, to be able to actually use DOT, there needs to be liquidity, right? Like for you to list DOT as collateral on UMI or as collateral for IST on Agoric, these things can't happen unless there's like a DEX with 7 figures of DOT liquidity sitting in a liquidity pool. Right? I think that's like, it would be really cool to see these things happen in Cosmos land, but I don't know if like I don't know if there's like, there's no other place really where DOT is like super liquid. And so I think, especially if you don't want to have to like go use a SEX or whatever to do a liquidation, it makes sense that like Osmosis Dex would have a large DOT pool, right? And so given that it's the first time that people can actually buy DOT outside of Polkadot in a decentralized way, I mean, just ask any of your friends, right? Like, how do you buy DOT? I think 9 times out of 10 people would say, I use Kraken or I use some other centralized exchange, and I move, I offboard onto Polkadot, and then I start using Polkadot.js, and I pretty much just stop from there. That's kind of like most people's experiences. If we now have like a large DOT pool on Osmosis, like that's sort of going to be the first time people can actually buy DOT in an actual decentralized way outside of the Polkadot ecosystem. And I think that's pretty big as well for DOT itself, right? Like diversifying who actually uses DOT, who actually holds DOT, and hopefully trying to cross-pollinate the two ecosystems a bit more.
And what's been the reception of this proposal within the DOT community?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the way it's structured is basically the treasury actually, the Polkadot treasury actually earns this, this yield, right? So it's not like us earning the yield, it's the treasury earning the yield from LPing .osmo.
Technically, how does that happen? What, like if the DOT treasury is basically yield farming these pools and Cosmos Dexes, then how is it getting the funds?
It's a loan, right? So they're basically loaning this to basically like not just, it's a coalition of Composable and a couple other teams. We then LP those, DOT and
Hmm.
Osmo together into the liquidity pool, and after some period of time, we repay this back to the Polkadot treasury, which,
I
by the
see.
way, currently doesn't earn any yields at all.
Right. Which is the status quo for a lot of these treasuries.
Exactly.
Yeah, Cosmos included. This is kind of a blunt force solution where the Polkadot community treasury loans it to a coalition of multi-sig signers that includes Composable Finance team and and a couple of others and a 2 out of 3 multi-sig for each, right? And then you would repay the treasury at a later date after you've yield farmed up to a certain period.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Yeah, that's right. So the idea is like we hit sort of key KPIs, right? So first would be like, 500,000 is deployed. Once, X number of, this will all be sort of detailed in the proposal we post, but essentially like once there's a XYZ new holders of DOT, for instance, then another 500K unlocks. And slowly more liquidity gets put into the pool until it's like, a substantial DOT pool sitting on osmosis that can be used as like the cornerstone for other DeFi operations, right? Because this is also interesting for the DOT community, because DOT has never been used, as collateral for IST. It's been used as collateral for stable coins that have failed in the past, but not for something like IST. DOT also has been used for lending protocols, but not necessarily, in the Cosmos ecosystem. And I think as more, even something as simple as, can I use DOT to buy, bad kids on Stargaze? These types of things just require liquidity for people to actually do this. And so I do think it's also in the Polkadot community's best interest to want to see DOT as an asset, expand its horizons to different places.
Mm-hmm. Okay, small aside, BrainJar, whatever it is that you're swiping at, it's creating a lot of
Oh, sorry.
background noise. It's very alarming.
Okay, sorry.
Whatever that is. Okay, so right, what you were saying is the value prop obviously makes sense for the DOT community because they get to export their blue chip, high liquidity, high market cap coin to other ecosystems in a decentralized way. That value prop is obvious to them, especially given that their own ecosystem may be a little lackluster in terms of the DeFi suite that they offer. Whereas the suite of products within Cosmos is much more robust. Therefore, if they export it to the Cosmos ecosystem, the users would be able to use it for a lot more dynamic usage.
That's exactly right. And I think as a whole, like the biggest problem that DOT has as an asset is finding usage, right? Like there's nothing really better in the DOT ecosystem than staking your DOT and earning like 17% APY. And so I do think that like if there are new use cases, even something like LPing ST Atom, ST Dot as an example, these things will, I think, hopefully catalyze. Yeah, I mean, I think in general, it not only catalyzes use cases for DOT, but I think it also makes both ecosystems become like philosophically attached, right? Like I am now committed to using DOT as an asset because it is IBC'd over here and used in my Cosmos DeFi sort of ecosystem. So that's kind of like, I think also like sociologically, we're now trying to cross-pollinate these two ecosystems, and like something like this, I hope really catalyzes it.
Let me ask you this from the perspective of an Atom Maxi. So right now, the most liquid coin within Cosmos is the Atom. So therefore, its de facto on-ramp coin into the Cosmos DeFi ecosystem. And it is the token that's used to collateralize for loans for lending markets, right? So, given that maybe we want to entrench this and now we're introducing DOT, what's the value to the Atom ecosystem then for doing this?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, like so one way I've been thinking about this is like ICS, right? So if all of a sudden Duality has a ton of people swapping DOT for different things in Duality itself, like the usage, hopefully, of the Duality DEX kind of accrues to Atom holders who are participating in staking, right? And so I think from my perspective, what you're saying is definitely true, right? It does reduce the sort of like, this is my only entryway. But I think because we take away this like sole entryway to the ecosystem, and now it's like expanded to multiple blue chip assets, hopefully activity rises, right? Like you would hope. And hopefully you have a more diverse base, right? It's not only that, Cosmos people are aping into DOT, but also DOT people are coming over to Cosmos and using Cosmos. And so I think like for Atom holders, this is sort of exciting because you have this kind of cross-pollination occurring, which results in sort of higher activity. And I think for an Atom holder, it's bullish specifically for protocols within the ICS corridor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes total sense. It's similar to how ETH got so big in that Ethereum is the platform for basically all DeFi economic activity. And that includes supporting almost all blue chip tokens, the most liquid tokens. But the caveat is, it's all settling in ETH.
Yeah.
So given that ICS gets enough market share and the Atom economic zone expands its creep, so to speak, and everything settles with Atom as the gas token and whatnot, then this end state could be realized. I can see that.
Yeah, I mean that's the hope, right? I'm not a prognosticator, but that's kind of the hope, right? And the first step is getting a lot of liquidity in there, in the Cosmos ecosystem for DOT to actually like make this possible so that it has a shot, right? Other attempts, like there was Axel DOT bridged over, I think last year by Axelar. I don't think anyone uses it. I don't think it's been treated as like a blue chip asset. It also isn't IBC DOT, right? So it's also different. So I think like this time, like we bring DOT over to the ecosystem, we do it the right way. And this is for me, like the right way.
Yeah, I would say the bridged tokens are interim solutions and eventually they will be secondary to the native ones.
Yeah, agree.
That's the hope. Okay. Now we have concluded the fun part of the show. Now to the tough part, brain jar. This is not a full episode without addressing the elephant in the room and why you are now showing your face.
Yeah, I mean, I was doxxed last, I think in 2021, or sometime in 2022.
February 2022.
February 2022. Yeah. I put out a statement, told everybody that this is what happened. And I held a community AMA with people and just like sort of told people, look, this is who I am. This happened in the past. We're building stuff that's really important for the ecosystem. Do you want to work with me or not? It's okay if you don't. But I'm still going to keep going. And I think that we've proven ourselves to definitely be like relentless in our sort of capacity and desire to actually ship and produce IBC, everywhere. I think it is also really exciting for us too that, we're like the first people to actually put this in production after a lot of people have said that they were going to do this. So for me, like, I'm glad that this sort of the team and the community has rallied around what we're building. and not necessarily me.
Right. Okay, Mr. S asks, what's doxing? I don't understand the concept. All right, maybe, perhaps you're not an English speaker, perhaps you're not you're not like a US citizen or whatever. So doxing is when your identity is your government real world identity gets leaked if you happen to be an anonymous person or a pseudonymous person. It could reveal your name or address or whatever, anything that leads back to your physical meat space identity. So that's doxing. And if you watch the first episode I did with Brainjar last year, you'll see that he came on as just an avatar, no face, like no person behind it. So that was completely anonymous. And the reason I bring this up is because, to have a full, complete episode, we need to address what happened last year. February 2022, Cointelegraph article headlined, and you don't, you've been doxxed, so I could say your name, right? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Omar Zaki settled with the SEC over allegations related to misrepresentation 3 years ago and is allegedly behind 2 other crypto projects that suffered devastating hacks. So that was the article. However, I did read the SEC cease and desist letter, and the criminal offense seemed to be rather minor, right? It was about you when you were in university at Yale, and you apparently misled investors pretty much by faking till you made it, right? You maybe gave some you represented your returns to be higher than what they were, right? Maybe when you first started your career, that was through a hedge fund.
Yeah, so I did address this all last year, but I'm happy to address now. So here's what happened. First of all, it was never criminal. Second of all, there was never any cease and desist letter. Third of all, it never actually went to trial. So essentially, this is a type of situation, and a lot of other DeFi protocols are going through this, by the way. If you don't actually know that they are, like Barnbridge, for instance, is going through this. And essentially, the SEC just knocks on your door and says, hey, we want to investigate you for XYZ thing. And you have 2 options. You either decide to fight them, or you decide to just say, I admit, neither confirming nor denying that I actually did what you're accusing me of. And instead, I'm just going to settle with you. And so I decided to take that path of settlement because I was a college student. I had no money to my name, couldn't actually pay for an expensive lawyer to defend me in court. And so, how this all came about, and essentially I was trying to do a hedge fund in my dorm room, didn't really understand how it worked. So the people who were involved were some friends of mine who ended up not being friends of mine. And then, this all sort of blew up in glorious fashion. And so I think a lot of this is, that's essentially how it played out, really.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, the letter that I read was from the SEC, and it was a cease and desist. Is that the one that you're talking about?
Yeah, so there should be like a letter. Sorry, I'm just running to connect my laptop. 1 second. So there should be something on the internet that basically says it should just be like a settlement agreement.
Right. And the settlement was just $25K, small settlement
right.
compared to other settlements like the Ripple settlement.
Yeah.
And we know that the SEC is now it's just a like a mob boss, and you have to pay your racket fee to get out of enforcement action.
Exactly. There was nothing nice about this situation, but the sort of if there is a positive side of this is I'm probably one of the only crypto founders that has experience dealing with this, with the mob boss. And so for me, I think this was really just a hardening experience. It just taught me the importance of like resilience and actually like doing the right thing and continuing, no matter what actually happens. So yeah.
Sure, and you've been building ever since in the builder space instead of the finance space.
That's right. Finance is boring anyway.
Would agree. The other thing that caught my attention in that article was that it states, in addition, two crypto projects allegedly run by Zaki called Warp Finance and Forced Out allegedly suffered hacks resulting in 8.36 million in lost funds, some of which were partially recovered. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, so I wasn't involved in, and you guys can also, I think you should also link the statement that I put out after this was released. It's on my Medium. I can share that afterwards. But there is like, I was never involved in either project. I don't really understand how these, I think in general, most people on CT see something, try to form a nice story about it. And that was really the case, I think, with me in this specific scenario. And like after I released the statement, et cetera, people still want to believe what they want to believe.
Were there actually hacks though?
I mean, the protocols were hacked, but that has nothing really to do with me, right? Like I didn't work on the protocols. I didn't have involvement in the protocols.
Why? Yeah, then so you weren't involved in either of those two protocols at all?
I mean, so like from a perspective of like building them out, et cetera, like I had nothing to do with any of these protocols. I may have like known about these projects, but never actually like participated in them or actually helped build them out. So like, I don't exactly know, still to this day, I don't exactly know how all these like this web of stuff was tied together and presented on a bow in this like thread of CT. So,
why would Zach XBT claim that you were involved in those two projects that got hacked?
Maybe hearsay. I don't know. Like he didn't actually confer with me before releasing his tweet thread. Although I wish he would.
Okay, so you definitively had no involvement with Warp Finance or Forced Out.
I absolutely refute that. That's right. And it's in my statement that I released last year as well. So I think
that's really weird.
I mean, if we had had the chance to discuss things together, it would have been all right. But I think in general, this is the situation. And I've lived through it already, put out the statement, did my AMA, talking about it here, but hoping that like over time, there is some sort of like retraction or whatever from his side. But one can only hope.
Right. Okay, we got a question from the audience. Jack Alfonso asks, are there any other chains other than ETH you're expanding to? I mean, we're talking about Polkadot first. They're expanding to Polkadot.
Yeah, I mean, so other than ETH, we're looking at, we got a grant to do near IBC as well. So we're looking to do like IBC to near as like the sort of next integration beyond Ethereum. And beyond that, I think we're also looking at like multiple other sort of EVM equivalent chains like Polygon, BNB, and L2s as well. The OP stack has been really interesting. I don't think we've like committed to actually working on IBC to OP stack rollups, but it is something that's been explored in the ecosystem.
So are you intending to make your Kusama parachain the bridge between all of these ecosystems that you support, the way that Wormhole is Wormhole and Axelar are, at the center, and this would be another bridge to those ecosystems?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, like our focus, so our architecture has sort of like changed since the last time we spoke last year. So if you want to put up that slide from before of the architecture, basically for the past few months, we've spent a lot of time actually working on building out a Cosmos chain called Centauri, which is like the chain where we're doing a lot of the it's becoming sort of our transport hub for a lot of the IBC integrations we're seeking to do. So originally the intention was, okay, we could shovel these things into Picasso, and eventually we'll be able to support IBC to all these different ecosystems, but I think that's just simply not scalable. And so essentially how we've decided to build all these different connections is we're focused on, how it works currently is we basically have a Polkadot parachain, and this connects to our Kusama parachain over IBC. And from the Kusama parachain to our Cosmos chain, the Centauri chain, we IBC that way as well. So we're hoping to do sort of the same thing for other ecosystems too.
So how would you disambiguate this from, or Picasso, I suppose, the functionality of Picasso from Wormhole, Axelar, Polymer, DAO?
Yeah, I mean, so I think Wormhole and Axelar are both trusted bridges. That's like the first thing. So I don't think they're really worth discussing. I mean, I think there are some like components that they're trying to turn into like trustless like IBC integrations. But I think like they're committed currently to just doing trusted bridging, right? And so I think the more sort of we should compare ourselves more so to people who are doing IBC. And from Polymer's perspective, I think for the most part, they're looking at finding ways to actually improve upon the IBC stack. I think there's a lot of similarities. We've also collaborated together. I'd say like the first sort of core difference is we've been focused on Ethereum, but that hasn't really been our only focus. We've focused on Polkadot, we've focused on Near, we've focused on other chains. And I think we also don't really intend on, having every chain have a sort of ability to sort of IBC themselves. I think we believe that it's important for someone to actually go in and do, the work of actually wiring up these chains to have IBC. I think it's like way too early to think about this concept of like permissionless IBC in other ecosystems. So anyway, but we work well together. We've worked together in the past. I think in general, anyone trying to build IBC.
Oh, sorry, Branger. Whatever you're doing is creating significant noise.
Okay, sorry.
I don't know what that is.
I'm just like, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Or whatever you're touching is making a loud noise.
Okay. What was the last thing that you heard?
Run it back to you're working with Polymer.
Yeah, we've been collaborating on some things in the past. We're not really collaborating as much currently, but I think in general, anyone that's building IBC solutions is like somebody we're looking to partner with and work with, and we have worked with in the past. I mean, we've worked quite a bit with Jack in the past and still do on lots of IBC Go sort of refactors and implementations. And so hoping to continue to do so with like anyone in the ecosystem.
Got it. So what is your main focus at Composable Finance? It sounds as if it is to export IBC to these different ecosystems that are currently non-compatible. You've gotten grants from Near and as far as I understand, is attempting to get one from Polygon as well. But you're building a full stack solution, and you have a DEX as well. How are you balancing these priorities?
Yeah, so I think our priorities are, 100%. Basically, I'd say it's like IBC and then whatever else we can build on top of IBC. And so for us, like the focus is IBC everywhere. We spend time actually building the light clients, building the relayer extensions necessary for this, figuring out the IBC stacks and all these different chains. Every single chain is really, really different. And like, there is no way to actually generalize things. And so, so that's like, it is a lot of work to just do a single IBC integration. I think now it's probably easier, given that we've spent like multiple years doing this specific integration, but I don't think it's going to get any like dramatically easier. And so our focus is really IBC. I think why we built a DEX in the first place was to show sort of the .sama community, hey guys, because I've always felt like Polkadot has been very like, we are Polkadot, we don't care about anything else. And building a DEX that where people can like consciously understand, okay, I can now swap DOT for Atom and vice versa, I think is like really, really powerful for people to like understand in their minds. And so we built like a DEX specifically, we built the Pablo DEX specifically to allow for people to understand, okay, this is what cross ecosystem DeFi could look like. But by no means is it like a flagship like thing that we're like, we're not a DEX project. Like we're a, you know, a cross-chain project that's trying to bring about cross-chain use cases. The other 25% that we focus on is XCVM. And so XCVM is like, how do you get multiple chains to speak to each other in such a way that doesn't require, you know, actually having the same execution environment?
Okay, that being said, you did allude to significant changes in the stack since we last talked. Can you enumerate them before we close out?
Yeah, I mean, so the first thing is we have the Cosmos chain. The second thing is we have actually now decided to make public our focus on, you know, IBC to Ethereum. The third thing is we are focusing a lot more resources and energy on XCVM itself, which is like, how do you get interchain accounts to Ethereum? How do you get interchain accounts to all these other ecosystems we're connecting using IBC? So the ability for you to like bridge and swap, you know, starting from Moonbeam on Polkadot all the way to Osmosis, I think is like really, really powerful. And I think that's like the main sort of upgrade to our stack. And the last thing that I'll say is we also deployed our CosmWasm VM on Picasso a couple of weeks ago on mainnet. And so people from different CosmWasm communities, whether it's Neutron or Juno, can also now come and deploy on our chain.
Why is it that you built the bridge as a Cosmos SDK chain rather than as a substrate chain?
I mean, so you need both, right? And so basically, like, we have this client called the Wasm client that is the light client on the Cosmos chain that lets us be able to move from Polkadot to the Cosmos ecosystem. And so in order for us to like actually get there, to actually get to that ecosystem, we do need this like hop that has a Wasm client available. So teams in the Cosmos ecosystem, sort of in January, when we were ready to actually deploy the Wasm client on these different chains, we've been collaborating with the ICF to actually, you know, upgrade this into IBC Go and have people start deploying with it. But the reality is, like, it is a substantial upgrade, and I don't think a lot of chains are ready to do this upgrade. And so we built this sort of like hop chain where people can just connect directly, and they don't have to really worry about, you know, connecting directly to Picasso. Juno is currently working on connecting directly to Picasso. They're upgrading and including the Wasm client, but I think most teams in general are happy with this approach. And then when they do want to connect directly, they can through just a very simple migration that we have like built out.
Perfect. We're going to close out with housekeeping. What are the timelines for any of your upcoming integration? Like what are the dates of significant milestones? And, you know, what do you want our listeners to know about other than what we've talked about?
Yeah, I mean, so I think throughout the month of July, we're going to be heavily focused on like hitting up pretty much every Cosmos chain and getting DOT to do something there. it's funny because like now we are ambassadors of Polkadot, even though Polkadot's like not super happy about us doing IBC. So we're pretty much like rolling into every Cosmos chain DeFi that does DeFi or anything that could use Polkadot, and trying to actually find the use cases there. And so for the next like month, I think the focus is open channels, deploy liquidity, do this proposal, and have these DeFi use cases live, like all by the end of July.
Great. Do you expect that DOT liquidity proposal to pass in the Polkadot ecosystem, given that they're not that ecstatic about you importing IBC to their ecosystem?
I mean, so I think we're gonna have to make a really good case. I think also Cosmos people, if you guys want to buy DOT and vote, that would be definitely much appreciated. But yeah, I don't know really. I think it just, we're gonna see.
Okay, great. We're going to close out. Where can people find you? Where can people go to hear more about Composable's latest updates and follow on your progress?
Yes, so follow our Twitter. It's at ComposableFin on Twitter. You can follow me at 0xBrainjar on Twitter, and follow our Medium, join our Discord, etc.
All right, great. And it was good having you on. Thank you, BrainJar, for being candid with me, given all the questions I've asked you. So that was much appreciated. And we will link that Medium post in the description that the Medium post that you wrote in the description below. So next week, we're not going to have a live stream. We'll be at ETHCC recording more short form shows for you that will air in August. So stay tuned for that. And then we'll see you in the next one. Bye.